And unfortunately, a lot of these revolutionaries seem to have not studied history at all or realized that they're the first ones, once everything's taken over, the first ones told to face the wall because they don't want that opposition anymore, right? So, in my estimate, I think that all of this stuff is meant to destroy the free world essentially, right? So the revolutionaries is trying to bring in some kind of communism or authoritarianism, and my goal as a musician is to call it all out. And I don't care what side it comes from, left or right, is to call it out and side with liberty.
Welcome to another installment of Live Free. I'm your host, Gene Owens. On this show, I like to highlight dissident voices in the arts and music. My guest today definitely fits that description. Please welcome Charles Knickerbocker of the band Hi Cap Maggie.
Hey, how are you, Gene?
I'm doing very well. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you. I discovered your music and your band's music, I guess maybe late last year, and I've just been following everything that you put out. It's just one banger after another, including your latest single, Battle the Elite. And I want to talk about that. But first, just give me a little background on yourself and where you grew up. What's your background in music?
Oh, wow. Well, I was born in New York and then I was raised in Wyoming. So that juxtaposition is probably a lot of what influenced me to be in the middle. um, and then I spent most of my adult life in Florida. So kind of a couple different places. Um, my great grandfather actually was a famous musician. He was a trombone player. And so I think it was kind of always in the family. I remember my grandma warning me, about the dangers of, playing music and the life it could lead because my Uncle Ed was a jazz musician and man, he got into so much bad stuff and trouble back in the, geez, I don't even know how long ago, probably the 50s and 60s, something like that.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I started with trumpet and, choir, all of that stuff. And then eventually I was actually writing a lot of poetry. And then, the next step from poetry is to make music. So I, saved up all the money I could and got a guitar. And then, man, I think I had my first band when I was like 17. And you know how it goes. And then it's just band after band after band. And so that's kind of how I got started and everything. But then 2020, when the government shut everything down, I figured maybe I was just done. Like maybe I just stopped playing music and, because I was out of a job. So maybe it's time to just stop doing that and focus more on raising my daughter. And then, well, as the person I am, I can't keep my mouth shut. So I started writing more music.
Yeah, man. Very cool that you kind of have music in your blood, that going back to your grandfather, you said, being a jazz musician,
Oh, my great grandfather.
your great grandfather.
Yeah, he actually played classical. He was a classical trombonist. He was man, he was from Santa Barbara. Well, yeah, he was from Santa Barbara, California, and I can't remember which movie studio he worked with. But back then they would take the whole orchestra on set. So like he was one of the trombone players in Gone with the Wind. So well, you should know that, Georgia, right? So they had to be on set the whole time because they would record the music at the same time the actors were doing their parts, which is kind of crazy, And then he
Yeah,
had a
that's
show.
that's
Oh, go
like
ahead.
that's like theater, doing
Yeah,
like I didn't realize that they did that for some of those early films. But that
yeah,
makes sense. Yeah.
yeah. So then he got a show at Radio City Music Hall, and that's when they moved from California to New York. And then so that's where that's where my grandmother was raised. Was they had a place in Manhattan there, and then they had a farmhouse that was up north. And then she fell in love with the farm boy that was taking care of the farm, and gave up the wealth for love. I mean, it's an amazing story. Listen, she sent me a letter one Christmas that kind of detailed a lot, like falling in love with my grandfather and having a house where he was stealing electricity from the neighbor at night to run a hot plate and a space heater so they wouldn't freeze to death while he was rebuilding this old colonial home, basically. And my father, that first Christmas, he just learned to walk, basically. And him pitter pattering around in this house that was kind of empty, um,
Yeah, it's
and
amazing to think of the hardships that, our ancestors went through and that our grandfathers and great grandfathers endured. And now
yeah,
it's like we have these newer generations that their greatest hardship is like being misgendered, or they're like
yeah,
so fragile. You're talking about, somebody that had to try to steal electricity just so he wouldn't freeze to death while he was
yeah.
building a home for his family.
Yeah, on my mother's side, she was an infant when the Korean War was going on, and her older brother, would actually hold her and sleep in a septic tank during the day, so that so people wouldn't find them. And then at night, he would go out and try to find food and everything else, and then hide in the septic tank with her when she was just an infant. I mean, think about how crazy that is. And then
Insane.
how well off we have it, and like you said,
Mhm.
like, making problems out of nothing.
Yeah, yeah, we things are remarkably better in the Western world than they ever have been, but you wouldn't get that feeling by going on social media or, um, you know, talking to a lot of people, just because they're just kept in this constant state of fear and negativity. It's just like one thing to the next. But I wanted to, as I was reading your profile on Instagram, I think you described High Cap Maggie's music as music for the silenced, the censored, and the liberty-minded counter-revolutionaries.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that. Counter-revolutionary implies that they're opposed to to a mainstream revolution or another revolution, right? So
Yeah.
can you expand on that? What is the revolution that you are a counter-revolutionary to?
Oh, well, it's, for a while there, man, for years, I was trying to figure out it's kinda crazy to think that it's been, like, 3 or 4 years, right, since, like, all this stuff started.
All the COVID
Um,
insanity?
yeah, because
Mhm.
quite honestly, with a lot of it, I was kind of asleep at the wheel when it comes to political stuff, so, if there's people that don't like what I'm doing, those people are probably the ones that activated me, right? So, um, I was trying to figure out, like, why all this wokeness is promoted and what's the end goal and what is going on here, and I think what it all boils down to is communism, right? Like authoritarianism, whatever you want to call it. It's about a small elite that want to control everything. And unfortunately, a lot of these revolutionaries seem to have not studied history at all or realized that they're the first ones, once everything's taken over, are the first ones told to face the wall because they don't want that opposition anymore, right? And so, in my estimate, I think that all of this stuff is meant to destroy the free world, essentially, right? So the revolutionaries is trying to bring in some kind of communism or authoritarianism, and my goal as a musician is to call it all out. And I don't care what side it comes from, left or right, is to call it out and side with liberty.
Amen, brother. I agree wholeheartedly. And it's interesting when you look back at past communist revolutions, like the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. And like I've been kind of starting to do a deep dive on that period of history. And I'm learning that there was so much funding coming from foreign places and actually sending people, flooding Russia with people that weren't Russians, that were just these Marxists from other countries. In some places, even like I've heard, some things about how they were trying to recruit young communists in New York and in America to go fight and destabilize things under the czar in Russia to create this revolution. And it always starts with the cultural revolution, right? Where they start attacking all the social norms. And that's what we're seeing here. But yeah, it just makes it feels like all this stuff is so manufactured right now with
Yeah.
all of the none of it feels organic, right? Whether it's like the trans movement or I mean, even the Free Palestine movement that's taking hold of college campuses everywhere as we record this, even though that's been a cause that a lot of people that have been opposed to empire and have been anti-war have been on the side of for quite some time. But it just seems like now that's the current thing that these college kids have embraced. Whereas a few years ago it was BLM, and um, yeah, it just feels so astroturfed and so fake. And you also see that all these corporations, like Fortune 500 companies and these giant multinational corporations promoting the same stuff, which
Yeah.
definitely to me is like the biggest red flag that it's fake and that it is something that is being forced upon us by those, by the 1%, by the ruling elite.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting to me that, uh, well, I knew going into doing this project that I was going to get hate from both sides, right? Like I just knew that was going to be the case. I figured I'd get more hate from the left than I would the right, but I knew it would be both. And what's interesting to me is that even with like battle the elite, right, which is I think is pretty clear, straightforward when I'm saying there, right, that it's not the left and the right, right, it's the elite versus the people. I mean, it's pretty simple, and I still get attacked for it. It's
And
like, so,
what are the attacks that you get for that statement?
oh, well, mostly, I mean, it's nothing like crazy, but it's most people, I don't know if they're just in denial, right? Like they say that this stuff just doesn't exist. It's not true. And that I'm just pointing at a boogeyman that's not real, right? Or they essentially are defending the current system the way it is. And that I don't understand. Like, obviously, something's broken. Obviously, these people in Washington do not represent the people, right? When you see all these backroom deals and people flip flopping constantly, and I forget that study that came out that showed that like there's only like a 33% chance they'll even vote on something that people adamantly want, you know? I mean, obviously it's all messed up and it needs to be fixed. And I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if it's even fixable. I mean, I hope so. But to me, it seems you go around and you talk to regular people, right? Like I do the cover thing on the side, to make money. So I play a lot of shows in front of a lot of people, and I meet a lot of people. I mean, I will tell you, you only can play Wonderwall and Sweet Caroline so many times before you want to shoot your brains out. But I talk to all sorts of people from all spectrums of political beliefs, and when you're standing face to face, uh, it's not that polarized. Right? Most people, if I talk about this stuff lightly, right, not going into like crazy detail about the Federal Reserve and inflation and the destruction of our currency, and if I just talk to them just based on the surface level of everything, most people are pretty level-headed about all of it. But it seems that online and the media, that type of stuff, is just they amplify this. I don't know, probably less than 10% of people that feel this strongly about this crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's all meant to keep us constantly divided and fighting amongst each other and force us, silo us into these echo chambers of tribalism. It's like now people, and it works for some people. I mean, they think along. Some people think along those lines now. They how does Team Blue think about this, or how does Team Red think about this? So it has been a really effective tool. I mean, it also has convinced um, some people that they are being virtuous and they're fighting fascism by trying to cancel artists. You
Yeah,
know that
yeah,
that's to me is like so disgusting. Like uh, some of these chapters of Antifa, they've just dedicated themselves to canceling people like Michael Graves, who is a former singer of the Misfits, and they're just go like half of their Twitter is just them trying to incite people to harass the venues that are booking it. And
yeah,
And I'm like, that's you think you're anti-fascist by literally trying to stop art and musicians.
Yeah, they're basically saying we have to be fascists to get rid of the pretend fascists that we've made in our heads. It just boggles my mind. I don't know if that is a like a cognitive dissonance that they don't, that they can't put those two things together, or if it's just more probably, in my opinion, like they're lying. They know that they're being the fascists, but they want to pretend that they're fighting it.
Yeah, and it's hard because you can't have a conversation with those people. Like, they refuse to talk to anybody, um, on the other side of the aisle or on the other side of the issue. That's
Yeah,
why they are, they're against platforming people, platforming fascists, and anybody is a fascist that they disagree with, right? They
yeah,
call, and which is a classic, historically a classic Marxist tactic, where you call something racist, you call it fascist, you call it whatever horrible pejorative that is going to smear that person and then stop them from being heard. This
yeah,
has worked a lot for JK against JK Rowling, where
yeah,
I recently had a conversation with somebody in real life about JK Rowling, and I was saying, something in support of her, and the person responded with, "Well, I like her writing and of course the Harry Potter mythology and books, but I can't stand with her on her views on gays and her anti-LGBT stance." And I started asking them about that. Like, what is that actually, that stance? And beyond them just saying, "Oh, well, she hates gays." I go, "Oh, well, she's never said anything against gay people. She's very in support of the gay community. She's just taken issue with transgender people, transgender women, right? Men masquerading as women, encroaching upon women's spaces, whether that be women's sports, whether that be women's bathrooms, whether that's women's prisons now that we're seeing in California and England, where you can be a man that's being jailed, serving a sentence for rape and murder of women, and you can say you identify as a woman, and they will put you in a woman's prison, and it is just sheer lunacy. So I'm trying to explain this to this person. That's J.K. Rowling's problem with this. She has no problem with
yeah,
people, that want to live however they want to live and wear a dress, or they can do them. But when it comes to encroaching upon the rights of women, these hard-won rights that women and feminist activists have fought for years to win, that's where she takes issue. And the person I was talking to was like really receptive to it. They were like,
yeah,
"Wow, I really kind of just bought the clickbait headlines, and I never really looked into it for myself." And I think that's why these Marxist tactics work, because
yeah,
a lot of people are busy with their lives and they don't read past the headlines. And now we have activists and ideologues that are posing as journalists, and they're not actually reporting the truth. They're just pushing their ideology, and and it's effective in silencing people that would stand up and oppose this manufactured revolution of sorts that we seem to be in the throes of.
yeah. Well, I think, man, I think that was the whole purpose of pushing short form content, right? You push short form content, and people don't take the time, right? They just get conditioned to, I want to watch 10 seconds or less of anything, right? I want to read 10 seconds or less than anything. And to me, it never made sense why they would say short form content is better. Because I mean, you look at Joe Rogan, that is not short form content, right? 3, 4 hour conversations, and people are glued to it. So I don't believe it. I don't believe that short form content is king. I think long form actually is. Um, but they've also designed algorithms and stuff such that you have to have all that short form content in order to get any reach. And all that conditioning has made it such that people don't do their own research. People don't actually read the whole article, right? They read the headline, like you said, or they don't watch the full video. And unfortunately, that means that we have tons and tons and tons of people that are incredibly misinformed about a lot of things. And so when you're talking about that type of conversation, um, I mean, I've had the same where a guy was kinda coming after us saying, that we're a bunch of bootlickers and stuff, and that we just love the police, and I'm like, "Well, I don't." And he was like, "Well, how's that possible? You said, you were criticizing BLM." I'm like, "Well, yeah, I criticize BLM because they've done a lot of stupid crap, right? And I'll
And it's
criticize."
also a Marxist organization. If you look at the leaders, right,
Yeah,
they're self-admittedly and very vocal about being Marxist. And
yeah,
one of their things in their mission statement was like to destroy and dismantle the nuclear family.
yeah. And so this person was just bewildered that I would also say that, I think the greatest threat to any democracy or republic, right, is yes men with a uniform on that just follow orders. And this person, it just didn't equate to them that that was possible. Like, how could you possibly believe both of those things at the same time? And we live in a society today, well, maybe not. Like, maybe it's not as bad as it appears, right? Maybe it's the internet, but that we've lost that nuance of understanding a position, right? So, for instance, when we released the song Go On, right, which is about the grooming in schools and stuff, automatically people believed that I was against, the gay community. It's like, well, no, I actually have gay friends. I don't have a problem with people being gay. What I have a problem is what they're doing with the children. So that says a lot that automatically one side believes that if you were against what's going on to these children, that you're against the gay community. And I think the real tragedy in all of that to me is that the gay community has to take this hard hit about children because they're so linked to it. Even if they stand strong against it, they still take the hit, and that's horrible, right? Like, I wouldn't want to be associated with that stuff. I mean, heck, that's why I wrote the song. Like, people need to start talking about this stuff. I mean, if we don't protect children, what kind of future do we have?
And what you're talking about there is like gender theory being taught in schools and like transgenderism kind of being addressed or being introduced to children at young ages in the public school system. Is that what
Well,
you're talking about?
that song specifically is talking about um, the explicit material that's in a lot of these books that are in the schools. That's what I'm talking about, right?
I got some of that out of it, but I was interpreting it as the gender theory that is being pushed in schools now. And
Oh, I think. Well,
and
go
through
ahead.
like social emotional learning too. I think James Lindsay's talked about this, but they kind of and I just saw a video shared by Libs of TikTok where this woman is talking about like how she kind of lost her daughter to, you know, becoming trans and this kind of spiraled out of control. And all these ideas she got from her school counselor
Mm,
and teachers, saying like you might not be the gender of the sex you were born into, and introducing these concepts in a school setting
yeah,
by
yeah.
people that that are there that you're supposed to look up to and that are supposed to educate you and instill values and ideas in your head, and they're instilling those ideas. So that's what I was getting some of that out of your song. Go on.
Oh, no, that is correct. That is correct. I mean, one
Okay.
verse is specifically about the books, but that's part of it. And the other part of that song was talking about how they've mixed that with communism, essentially, right? And the goal is to divide the child from the parents, right? And along with it, it's to me, it's a view of they're going to lie about things and they're going to spew this craziness in order to create mental problems, which it's doing, right? It exasperates these issues, which I forget the study that was showing that most of the gender dysphoria stuff, it goes away by their 20s, right? So it's common for a lot of teenagers as they're going through all these hormonal changes and stuff in their body to get confusion, right? But once their body develops, most of the time it all goes away. And then the other studies that were showing that the suicide rates go up, right? When they start to go through all these transitional processes and stuff. So I don't think it's something that should be just completely banned off the board, right? Like if you become an adult and you still feel that way and you want to do something about it, well, you're an adult. Go do what you want. I don't care. My problem is, if you're going to essentially chemically castrate a child, right? You're either going to chemically castrate them or you're going to actually castrate them, you know? And you're permanently changing this child before they're an adult and they can really understand what they're doing. Like that's just, yeah, it's pure evil. It just doesn't make sense. And so kind of rounding this back to, what we're talking about, it's amazing to me that so many people will defend it. They'll defend what's going on to these children. And I don't get it. It just makes no sense to me.
They've been convinced, these people have been so brainwashed into thinking that that is being tolerant. The same people that in the next breath would not hesitate to cancel you because of a song you put out and try to, ruin your life or dox your address, and threaten your family. They at this on the other side, they think they are being tolerant and virtuous by allowing that child to be embrace their true self. I mean, it is sheer insanity. We collectively as a race, as a civilization, have decided long ago that there's ages of consent, so children can't drink, can't get tattoos, can't do these things that are like irreversible. But now there's at least a good chunk of this country that supports, uh, sex changes for children or chemically castrating children, using the same drugs that they use for convicted rapists to chemically castrate them to
Yeah.
use them to stop children from entering puberty. I mean, it is sheer evil. And yeah, I mean, that's really where we're at. And that I don't think there can be anything more grotesque than that. So I applaud you for having the courage to speak out against that and use music as a vehicle to do that.
Well, I appreciate that. To me, it was I didn't have a choice. I didn't have a choice. Uh, I am a Christian and I believe in God, right? And I prayed long and hard about what do I do this. And the overwhelming answer I got was there is no choice. Like you have to do this. And um, I had think about how crazy this is that in today that you would ever. I never becoming a musician ever thought I'd have to sit down with my wife and say, "Hey, if I release these songs I'm writing, I might get doxxed and people might try to burn down our house or hurt us, right? Like whoever thought you would have to have that kind of conversation for making music, right? It's just nuts to me. And she looked at me and said, "How are you going to look your daughter in the eyes years from now and tell her you did nothing?" And there's no choice. I have to. Because I mean, I looked at all the musicians I looked up to growing up and they all dropped to their knees. Like, what the heck, man? It broke my heart. Like all these people I looked up to. And so there wasn't a choice. I just have to do this. And it's not about the money. I mean, you know how it is being a musician. I've sunk so much money into this and if I don't make a dime back, that's fine. Like this has to happen because the culture has to change if we're going to change people's minds. And if we could do that, then maybe we can start changing the politics and maybe we can build a brighter future for children. That's what it all boils down to.
100%. Well, speaking of the rock stars and our musical heroes that were nowhere to be found or have fell to their knees in compliance. Your song "Hall of Hypocrites" which was the last single you put out, right? That was the message and the story behind that song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it reminded me. My friend Brad from Five Times August put out a song "Ain't No Rock and Roll." There ain't no rock and roll, which was very similar. It was like calling out all the people, all the rock stars that during the COVID tyranny that just either were silent or actively promoting
Yeah.
the the lockdowns and the masking and the forced and coerced experimental injections, or calling Neil Young calling for censorship and Joni Mitchell, these icons of the 60s that were once writing songs.
Uh-huh.
I'll tell you, man, I'm at the point now, I'm questioning everything. I've always been like a giant fan of like 60s music and counterculture and what I've understood of it. But now I'm like, was that fake? Was that being manufactured to some particular end by the elite of that time?
Yeah, it makes you wonder, right? Well, I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of what I've come to just accept is that a lot of musicians are just actors, right? Like a lot of musicians are actors or, like any other art, right? Whether it's writing books, right? Artists are creating something out of nothing, right? Kind of like Fogerty wrote all about Louisiana, and everyone pictures, the bayou when they hear his voice, but he wrote it all in San Francisco,
He was from the bayou of Northern California.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess it's foolish for me to have believed that all these musicians truly meant what they were saying or what they were singing about. It's actually a song of heartbreak, I think, for me, right? Like these people broke my heart. Dave Grohl is probably my musical hero out of everyone, like he just embodied everything I thought of as a musician. And it's funny because I got comments said, dissing Dave Grohl while you sound like Dave Grohl. And it's like, well, this is true because he's a huge influence on me. I absolutely loved man, my brother got me shoot, what is the name of that Nirvana album with Smells Like Teen Spirit on it? I can't
Oh,
remember.
that's the first one that or
The
well, it's the
first one.
second album, but it's the big one, right?
Yeah,
Nevermind. Yeah, their
Nevermind.
first one
That's
was
it.
Bleach that most people didn't get. Then Nevermind was the one where they became massive. I think they knocked Michael Jackson out of the number 1 slot on the Billboard chart,
Yeah, and I
and
mean,
that whole album is just banger after banger, right? Smells Like
yeah,
Teen Spirit, Come As You Are, In Bloom, like, they're all most of the hits are on that album.
yeah, my brother got me that album, and, it changed my life, and then, geez, when Dave went on to do his own thing, it was, it just man, those hit me hard, and geez, man, those that was a good time of music too, right? Because you had, uh, Foo Fighters, you had Alice in Chains, you had Soundgarden, Smashing Pumpkins, and all of that was huge to me, and I loved all that music, and then I guess to get back to the point, like I listened to a lot of Neil Young growing up, Springsteen, all of that, and I get a lot of these songs that they wrote weren't necessarily pro USA, right? But what they were was pro human, right? And that's the thing I think people don't get when they're throwing stuff at me about this is I get that, I get Born in the USA is not about the USA is great. What it's about is the little guy trying to survive, right? He's
Absolutely,
supposed to
and
that's who he was supposed to be defending. So when the little guy that's trying to survive doesn't want to take an experimental injection to go to your concert, you are no longer fighting for the little guy. That was the point, And man,
yeah,
yeah, I
it's
mean, I
criminal, and now that, there's more and more just today I was saying that if the AstraZeneca vaccine has been completely pulled from the market, and they're acknowledging that, it is causing rare, but, like, really deadly side effects. I think it's yet to be determined how rare those are, and then I saw that Pfizer a child in the Pfizer trial for some new gene therapy died, so they've stopped that, so their stocks have been hit an all-time low. So there's, like, more and more, um, information coming out and stories coming out of people being injured by these things. I wonder if any of these artists like Springsteen, like Dave Grohl, will ever take any accountability and just say, at the time we were afraid and we didn't know what was going on. We thought we were advocating for the best measure. In hindsight, we were wrong and we're sorry. I would love to hear any of those people say that. I don't know if we'll ever get that apology. And
I mean,
and even that apology is not going to bring back the people that died or were adversely affected by those injections that they felt like they had to do just to take part in society, to go see the band that they liked, to go on the cruise, to go see their family members at Christmas. I mean, it was such a horrible, divisive thing. We saw just the ugliness of humanity over that period. But yeah, I still would love to see some accountability from some of these artists that were pushing that nonsense.
yeah, I mean, I think Man, I think you hit the nail on the head. I don't think we'll ever hear it. I don't think we ever will. It would be nice, right? If someone just, or some of them just said, I was wrong. Like, I shouldn't have, pushed this. Um, and man, and I have a friend that he got it and got this massive clot in his brain, and he barely can function anymore. I mean, his speech is slurred. You can tell he's still thinking and everything's like he can still think, but it's very slow to speak. It's not, he's just not the same person that he was before. And luckily he's very well off, so he's taken care of, right? But then I think, what about the people that aren't well off that have had these type of issues? That's who I really feel for. Like, man, like how are they going to get through it? I mean,
And those
uh,
those injection manufacturers, the Pfizer, Modernas of the world, because of a law that I believe dates back to 1986, they have complete legal immunity. So they
yeah,
I mean, just imagine that in any other industry, right? Like if the automotive industry was immune from lawsuits, what would be their incentive to make, seatbelts that function or make airbags that function?
yeah,
Why? I mean,
yeah,
or to make, cars crash resistant in any way. They just make them tin cans. What nobody can sue them.
yeah.
And that's basically where we're at with these pharmaceutical companies and vaccine manufacturers.
Yeah, and that's where the right will gets mad at me because if I point that out and that it's Reagan, here comes the hate, and man, I I used to
Well,
wonder, right, when I would look at history, like how did Hitler and the Nazis come to power? Like, how is it possible, like, that the communists slaughtered so many people, in so many different countries, and how did all these people just fall in line, And the last few years has really shown that that's the case. It's like 75% of people will just fall in line with their tribe, whatever it is, rather than just saying, hey, uh, maybe my tribe is wrong. maybe the Democrats don't have my interest at heart. Maybe the Republicans don't have my interest at heart. And I don't know why it's so hard for people to break free of that. Why is it so hard?
I think they've just been conditioned their whole life to believe in the system, to believe that that elected officials care about them, that their party, their team cares about them, that their vote matters, that their vote even counts. And I'm so black-pilled when it comes to voting. I think it's completely rigged, and not just because of the last election, but because of almost every election I've seen in my lifetime, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
You, I think probably the last president that was genuinely elected and wasn't completely controlled was JFK. And you see what happens to the presidents that go off script and aren't down with what whether you want to call it the deep state or the elite or whatever, the real powers behind the curtain. When those people don't want to go along with it, that's what happens.
Yeah.
Like they
Yeah.
execute you and they do it in the most public way possible. So there's, his whole family and anybody else that thinks about, going off script, they don't. It's like Bill Hicks always one my favorite stand-up comedian of all time is Bill Hicks. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Bill Hicks. He's from he was from Texas, but, he talked about, like, every president that gets elected, they bring him into this room and they bring down, it's this dark, smoky room. There's all these old guys with cigars, and they bring down a screen and they play the JFK assassination, the Zapruder film, but from, like, an entirely different angle, right? You see
Yeah.
the other
Yeah.
shooter, and you see it was obviously like the government, the CIA involved, and then they just shut off the video and they go, "Any questions?" Because I think that was the last time we actually had a president that wasn't just completely co-opted and compromised.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say, I actually, Ron Paul said that, I think, on Timcast IRL, that he believes that was the end of the republic. was when JFK was assassinated, and he might be right. I mean, there's a book, American Betrayal, by I think it's Diana West or something like that. Anyway, and it details out FDR and working with the communists back in the 30s and 40s and stuff, right? And through the Lend-Lease program. And I can't remember the exact thing it talked about, but basically when the USSR fell, there was all this stuff that was coming out of the Kremlin, right? That was getting released. And one of the things it said was that Harry Hopkins, who was FDR's right-hand man, they said something to the effect of Harry Hopkins was their best asset. So, I mean, you're talking the right-hand man of the president of the United States in World War II. I mean, I think when you look at all of that, I think we were subverted a long, long time ago. And we've been just living in the shell of a republic since then, right? They give the illusion that we are a republic. They give us an illusion that we have these democratic processes that work, but they don't. Obviously, they don't. And, people will criticize for saying, oh, well, you don't have enough proof that this is the case. Well, it's kind of like Dave Smith said. I don't know if you heard his thing, the comedian Dave Smith. He was
I
talking
love Dave
about.
Smith, but I'm not sure I've heard the thing you're about to
Okay.
reference.
So what he was talking about was, I believe what he was talking about was in reference to the lockdowns and everything that happened, right? And what he was saying is, it's kind of like this woman's like, I think my husband's cheating on me, right? She's like, I have all these like pieces of evidence, far as like, I could just tell, like, there's all these little bits and things that I see happening that something's not like, I think he cheated on me. And then the fact checkers go, well, he well, he did cheat on you. It wasn't on Tuesday, it was on Friday, you know? And it's like, so they want to say, well, it must be your whole theory is debunked because of it. And it's like, well, no, the premise is correct. There was some cheating going on. You just don't have all the facts lined up properly. And I think when it comes to our republic, that's what we see. I think a lot of people can tell something's not right. A lot of people can tell the system is not working the way it's supposed to be working, and that maybe these people really don't represent us, but we don't have all the facts lined up to be able to be for certain to say, oh, it's this person and this person and this person, or these organizations are the ones that are controlling the politicians, type of thing. We don't know the exact thing, but we know something's wrong.
Well, talking about the people controlling the politicians, I think that's a good segue into the newest High Cap Maggie single, Battle the Elite. So why don't we I'm gonna go ahead and play the new video if that
All
sounds
right.
good to you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. And then we can talk about that.
nothing to be happy. It's a brave new world you'll see. Just close your eyes and go back to sleep. It's a great reset for all the sheep. Pierce the veil and open up your eyes. Shine into the light. It's the elites, we the people have to fight. Holding back our lives. Pierce the veil and open up your eyes. Open your eyes. Open your eyes. Open your eyes.
What a banger.
Thanks.
Love it, man. That's a jam. Killer. That drummer, man, is sick. He's got some insane fills. Great chops.
Yeah, he's something else. He's only 21. He's hungry. Michael Dees is his name. He actually moved from Houston up to Austin just for this, like to try to play music for a living. And he's dedicated. He works hard. Dude, he shows up on time. Like,
Yeah, that's hard to come by with musicians.
yeah, he shows up on time. He puts in the work. He's very good to work with. He takes criticism well. Uh, Actually, everyone in this band right now, it's been phenomenal. Like everyone takes criticism well. We can flush out ideas. Uh, and I mean, dude, it's thunder. I mean, one of the shots there inside the container with the drums, I made the mistake of being in there when he started. Oh my goodness. I thought I was going to lose my hearing. Like it was just thunder coming out of that thing. It was awesome. So yeah, he's something else.
Is the band just a studio project at this point, or are y'all? Have you played any live shows? And if
Ne-
not, do you plan on any live performances in the future?
yeah. Well, it started off as a studio project and it was just me. So basically these first 5 songs was just me doing all the parts, everything. And well, except for Go On, we actually ended up we edited the drums a little and then we tracked Abel on bass. Because thankfully they caught that my groove wasn't quite right for that song. So we fixed that one before we released it. And but otherwise everything else was me at the time. And I wasn't sure I could get any musicians to sign on to what I was doing, and I get why people wouldn't. So 2 of the drummers that I kind of had didn't want to do it permanently because they don't want that heat, you know. So but Abel, on the other hand, I reached out to him for Empire of Lies just to be in the video because I didn't want the video to just be me. And then he was just like, "Man, I fled California for a reason. Um, I feel the same way. Like I'm down. Let's do this." So Abel's been permanent since November of last year, and then Michael, we got man, just a couple months ago, end of February, he signed on, and so that's a long about way to tell you that as far as live performance is concerned, I that's my favorite part of doing all of this, music wise. Like I love live performance, and so I'm itching at the bit to get out there and do it. And so now it's more of a get everybody together, finalize. I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to most of this stuff. So I want to make sure we have the whole show put together, that everything works great, that we have smooth transitions and that type of stuff before we start playing live. But I'm hoping I hate to say it, but I'm hoping by the end of summer that we'll be able to really start cranking some shows around Texas is kind of how I'd like. And then if we can make that work, then my thought is to move across eastwardly, over through Georgia down to Florida and back type of thing. But who knows? I mean, it might just be we stay in Texas and that's basically it. And I keep we keep making music and releasing it and playing locally, or I'll take it or however far it'll go. So
Yeah, man. Well, if you come through Georgia, let me know. Would love to. Faithless Town would love to share the bill with you.
that'd be awesome. I'd love
That'd
to
be
do a collaboration with you sometime.
Yeah, actually, I'm in the studio right now finishing up 3 new songs that I'll probably release as singles, um, throughout the rest of the year, and there's one that's the message is very akin to the message of Battle of the Elite, so, maybe after this podcast recording, we can talk off air and we can make that happen because, yeah, I could see, your singing on it could be really cool, doing some kind of trading off vocals on it. But yeah, I'm still finishing up the track in the studio. And speaking of the studio, are you going to a professional studio there in Texas and recording all this stuff? Are you doing it all in like a home studio setup?
It's all right here in this room, this spare bedroom. Even the drums. I mean, I hate to say that. The
I mean, it sounds great. So I mean, whatever you're doing, it's working.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to me to think that not very long ago you couldn't track drums in a bedroom, that you had to go to a studio, or even guitar emulators, right? Like all of that guitar sound is all, Line 6 Helix plug-in, Um, I remember trying to record, trying to get around that years ago, and it was impossible. But it pains me to say that yes, the drums for these first songs I programmed with Easy Drummer. So I went through and programmed all the drums, pretending I was a drummer, trying to figure out what would I do if I was a drummer, and it's so wrong, right? Um, and so I when I look back at it, I wish I had Michael to do his, because his parts when we practice is so much better than the recordings. Like they're so much better. And like the new song we're working on, I mean, if none of these others songs get us canceled, this next one will.
Oh man. See, and that's the issue when right? That's like the challenge when you start booking shows is that you got to deal with the venues.
Yeah,
And a
yeah,
lot of these, depending like I love indie rock and but most of the indie rock venues were the ones that kowtowed the most to all the COVID nonsense, the requiring, people to show their medical records for entry and to be masked up all the time and be 6 feet apart or they stayed closed like as long as they possibly could to make sure
yeah,
it was safe. And then they all kind of politically lean, usually hard left.
yeah,
And so that's kind of a challenge when you're booking shows too, right? That you always run the risk that there's somebody like the lighting guy is going to be like, that guy's a fascist. You shouldn't book them. They're Hitler. Um,
yeah, yeah,
So that's all like a whole another level of challenge. It's not like, yeah, you're gonna go and you're gonna do a night of cover songs somewhere and right, and it's like no issue, but playing original music and then controversial original music at that, it's like a whole nother thing.
yeah. I mean, we'll cross that bridge when we get there to see how it goes. I definitely want to make sure I lock down my own sound guy. Of course, I mean, just in general, like as a any performing band should. So, pro tip out there for you guys: any professional performing bands, you should lock down a really good front of house guy that you pay and pay him well, right? I mean, in my past bands, we've played shows where we lost money, because we made sure that we paid the sound guy all the money plus more, because that's what you're gonna sound like to everybody else. And I don't know why so many bands seem to not understand that, right? They just think it's like, give $50 to a random sound guy and everything's going to be fine. So I definitely want to lock down a good sound guy to do our front of house. Because, yeah, if the light guy decides to be a jerk, screw it. As long as we sound good, we'll deal with it. But uh, as far as venues and stuff, I don't know how that's going to go. We'll have to see what happens. But I my faith tells me that it's all going to work out just fine.
I think so too, man. And I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully I can catch you out on tour
Yeah,
soon.
that would be awesome.
Oh, speaking of the band, and before we wrap up, where did the name High Cap Maggie come from? What is the origin of that band name? What's the story
Oh
behind that?
man, I got to give credit to a guy named John Coffey. Um, I was a firearms instructor for many years, and we had fully automatic uh, rifles and submachine guns and stuff where I worked. And so we would get lots of tourists in that want to shoot a machine gun because they've never gotten to do full automatic, I mean, even some locals, right, in Florida. And so it's kind of twofold. Is one was we were, uh, so if you look at a 30 round magazine for an AR-15, right? Um, that is a standard capacity magazine for an AR-15. But in order to demonize it, they call it a high capacity magazine, right? Because it's high capacity, it holds 30 rounds. No, it's standard capacity. So the joke was it's a high capacity magazine. So when we go do full auto for the M4, it would be people would come up to the desk and say, "Hey, I need another high cap Maggie," because they need another high capacity magazine. That's the joke, to take it out there for someone to go blow off 30 rounds. So high cap Maggie, you need a high cap Maggie. And John Coffey said it enough times. I was like, that'd be a great band name. So that's where that came from.
Very cool. I would have never put that together, man. Yeah,
Yeah,
I would.
that's
Yeah,
okay.
that's awesome. High capacity magazine. Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. Well, thank you so much, Charles, for joining me. It's been I really enjoyed the conversation. Where is a good place for people to find you and support your music?
Oh man. Well, first, thanks for having me. It was an honor. This was awesome. Great time talking to you. They can go to highcapmaggie.com. All the socials is at highcapmaggie. Most of the time, I think Instagram's our biggest account right now. Though Clapper, which I had not heard of the Clapper app for a long time, but that one seems to be growing really quickly for us. But we're across all platforms. Highcap Maggie.
Great. And if people want to support what you're doing, is the best way to buy your songs on iTunes or Amazon, or where's the best place for people, to give you some kind of financial support and show some love?
Yeah, I guess buy the music. Go to the merch store that's linked within Instagram and our website and all of that. Buy some T-shirts, that type of thing. I mean, that would be awesome.
Oh yeah, I should have my High Cat Maggie t-shirt. You were nice enough to send me a shirt. So
Yeah.
I should have had that here with me, but yeah, it's become my new favorite shirt.
Oh
Excellent,
well, thanks.
high caliber materials, and yeah, thanks again for sending that my way. And I've made a point of, I think I've bought all your singles so far on iTunes. So
Oh well,
I have
thank
to
you.
get Battle the Elite. That's the new one. And maybe eventually, or you think you're building up to a full length album? Is that the goal?
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of the goal. Currently, there's only one song on it that we're going to release that's not really political, which is actually the next big single. Is the first non-political song. So I don't know how many more political songs we'll do. My gut tells me a ton of them, but yeah, I'm hoping once we hit 10 to wrap them all together. The guy that's been doing the artwork, Jake Farrell, he's a tattoo artist out of Indiana. Actually, kind of a random thing. Met him on Instagram, and I just liked his work. And I was like, "Hey, man, you ever done album artwork?" But I want to put it all together and package it, because I mean, all that artwork alone together, I think will look really cool. So I don't know if we'll do CDs, cassettes, vinyls, or maybe all three. I don't know, but I definitely want to package it all together because the sound is definitely comprehensive and the subject matter is pretty comprehensive together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a big advocate for physical media. In a world where the elite, as if we'll call them that, or the powers that shouldn't be, where they want us to own nothing and be happy. We should own things. We should have our own music, our own books in physical form. So it can't just be in the cloud somewhere that our access to can be shut off at somebody else's whim.
Yeah, agreed. Or stealth edit, right? Where they can go in and stealth edit things because it's digital, and then the next time you watch it, it's not there.
Right? Yeah. They
Yeah,
could change the lyrics of your song even with
yeah,
AI. I mean, now there's like sensitivity readers where they're rewriting classic pieces of literature, classic novels to make it more inclusive and equitable for our time. I mean, it's Orwellian. So yeah, physical
Yeah.
media is where it's at. Own the actual copies of things, so it is yours, and it can't be yeah, it can't be digitally altered and just or your access to it can't be shut off at somebody else's discretion.
Yeah, not to go on another tangent, but that's one of the things I do is I go into antique stores, old bookstores, because just like dictionaries alone, right? Like they keep changing definitions. So I keep picking up old dictionaries, and I pick up old books because I want my daughter to have access to these old books in the original format that they were in.
It's like, "Daddy, look, in this dictionary from 1996, it says a woman is a biological female,"
Right, exactly.
as opposed to whatever the 2024 edition might read.
Yeah, or she might, who knows, 20 years from now, she'll pick up 1984 straight off the shelf and it'll be like the government's great. Like everything's fine,
Yes, I
like
2 plus 2 is 5. Uh,
yeah.
yes, war is peace. That is the message. Yeah, it's, physical media is where it's at, and interesting times we find ourselves in, but Charles Knickerbocker, thank you so much for being a brave voice in the arts and keep doing what you're doing. I can't wait to hear the next High Cap Maggie effort, and until next time, stay fearless and live free.
How long before the darkness meets the light?